Hi, hello everyone. Welcome to the Quinnox and Software AG webinar on Discover the Secret Sauce for Successful API Strategy. I welcome you all. Jaffar, over to you.
Thank you, Survi. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar and with Software AG, Quinnox, and Tractor Supply. Thank you for joining us and taking the time. I know this is a very important subject, and we hope to make some good inputs into some of the things that you're trying to do at your organization level. Let me quickly move over and introduce you to the panelists here. I have Brenton House, who represents Software AG. He's a vice president with almost 25 plus years of experience, very diverse experiences and background. He has been a ex-hacker, he's a digital strategist, and also he has been deeply involved with API security and APIs in general industry, and is an advisor in this forum. And from Tractor Supply, we have Nelson Stevland, Senior Director, Enterprise Integrations. Tremendous amount of experience behind his back, almost 25 years and almost 15 years, extensive expertise in the integration space. He leads the Tractor Supply, digital integration space, and has been with multiple, retailers in the past. Knows what it takes to deliver very robust and scalable, reliable platforms from an API's perspective. So those are the two stalwarts. I'm Jaffar. I'm Senior Vice President. I head the market strategy for our digital integration practice and have almost 25 years of experience in software consulting. So those are the three speakers and panelists that we have. The agenda for today is we'll start off with Brenton sharing some of the things that he shares very well. He's also, by the way, he's into cinematography. So he will do his magic for the first 15 to 20 minutes. He'll share some insights into API security. Followed by that, I'll share some of the key highlights and important things organizations should take care of in API security and testing. And then we'll follow it up with a conversation with Nelson so that he shares his experience in terms of really delivering integration and APIs in large organization. And then we open it to the audience for any questions. So that's the format we'll follow. It's a 1 hour session. And over to you, Brenton, and we'll get started.
All right, thank you. So yeah, let's get this started. So hello, everyone. I'm Brenton House, and I equip organizations to be successful in creating secure API solutions and strategies. So make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened as your exploration into the world of API security is about to begin. So I'm an ex-hacker, architect, consultant strategist, and now vice president of digital evangelism at Software AG. I use visual storytelling to leverage my 25 plus years of hands-on experience in the world of APIs to create secure strategies for enterprises on their API and digital transformation journeys. But I'm here today to help you understand the importance of API security. That's right, I'm going to give you the keys that you need to know to survive and thrive in this API economy. But before we go there, we need to answer a basic question. You're probably already keenly aware of cybersecurity and how important it is. It's a priority for most organizations. But why APIs? And what role does API security play in the greater cybersecurity strategy? So let's take a look at what's going on right now. According to a recent report by Domo, in the next 60 seconds, people will watch 694,000 hours of videos on YouTube. Twitter users will post 575,000 tweets. Slack users will send 148,000 messages. Google will conduct 5.7 million searches. 12 million people will send an iMessage. Users will send 2 million Snapchats, and people will watch 167 million videos on TikTok. Now, this list goes on, but there's one thing in common. All of these services and more are powered by APIs. Now, this API economy that we live in has found its way into every organization, into people's homes, their smartphones, smart cars, smart watches, smart refrigerators, and even smart thermostats. But it's much more than that. It's also about revolutionizing how enterprises are organizing their products, their teams, their resources, and their budgets. APIs are the gateway to your product and what enable your business to engage with consumers in the digital world. In order to compete in this very fast-moving API market, companies are now adopting API-first strategies and allocating budget and resources to allow them to succeed and win. Now, APIs have been around for a long time. When APIs first started appearing, it was great. Being able to access data in a structured way without having to go through all kinds of adapters or connectors to get your database was pretty cool. I created my first API back in the 90s using Cold Fusion and JavaScript, and the API client that I built to consume it was actually just Flash controls on a web page. It was great. It was an easy way to get the data you wanted from a database over HTTP. However, back then, people didn't put much, if any, thought into security for their APIs. I mean, who even knew it was there, right? Well, welcome to the future. Okay, so maybe we aren't living in the future that we all hope for, but as far as APIs go, things have come a long way since the beginning. APIs are everywhere, and their numbers are growing exponentially. You may be thinking that your API program is too small or that your data is really not that valuable and no one would want to hack your API to get to it. You are not fine. If your API ecosystem is not secure, you could lose everything. As long as there have been APIs, there have been hackers who have been searching for vulnerabilities in those APIs. The very thing that makes APIs great can also make them an easy target for attacks. They have predictable and documented methods and standards for usage. And API security and cybersecurity is of critical importance for every organization, especially now. So we know that APIs are an essential part of almost every organization, but we also know that APIs are a highly desired and attractive target for hackers and cyber attacks. Secure your APIs. Nobody wants to be in the headlines for all the wrong reasons. Earlier, Gartner had predicted that by 2022, API abuses would move from infrequent to the most frequent attack vector. The growth in not only the number of APIs, but the exponential increase in API usage has made this prediction all the more impactful on organizations in every vertical. According to the latest Salt Labs report, API traffic has increased by 141%, and API attacks increased by 348% just from December 2020 to June of 2021. Now, you may be familiar with the Peloton API breach. In January of 2021, as security researchers discovered that an unauthenticated user could access a Peloton API and get access to personal data for any user, including those that had their profile marked as private. The data exposed included instructor IDs, user IDs, group membership, location, workout stats, gender, age, and more. Now, the reason this case got so much attention is the fact that they did not respond in a timely manner, and the fact that the personal data that was exposed included data from the President of the United States. Now, cybersecurity experts had done a lengthy investigation to ensure that the President's bike was safe in the White House, but API security was a blind spot for their cybersecurity strategy. Okay, now for some good news. The number of resources available to assist organizations in understanding and implementing a proper API security strategy and architecture has also grown. Let's start with one valuable resource that you may have already heard of. If you've done any research into API security and cybersecurity, there's a good chance you've already been introduced to OWASP, but I'd like to define it anyways for you. OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. It's an international nonprofit organization that is dedicated to web application security. Now, what they're probably most well known for is their recurring top 10 list of web vulnerabilities. But in addition to their list of web vulnerabilities, they also came out with a top 10 list for API security. Now, these lists are an important resource to factor in when creating an API security strategy for your organizations. Now, let's jump over to the studio and take a look at them real quickly. So we have a lot. There's a lot of information that we have here. I'm not going to read all of these, but this list of 10 security vulnerabilities for APIs is going to play a critical role in the story going forward. So pay attention and give you the things that you need to know to be successful in your API security journey. Let's start with number one. Number one is know your data. You need to know what data you have and what data you're providing access to. What data do your customers and applications need compared to what data you're actually allowing access to right now? You might have data like user info, product info, partner info, commerce transactions, and billing. It all depends on what your product is and who your target audience is. Now, only you know your system that well and can evaluate the type of data and classifications that you need to know to provide access properly for your APIs. Now, do you ever find yourself in those situations where you or someone else gets nervous and just starts talking, can't stop, even though they really want to stop? Sometimes this is called word vomit. Well, there's an API vulnerability called excessive data exposure that I like to refer to as API word vomit. You can call an API to get, say, a user or another entity, and you can get that info, the stuff you're expecting, but often you get a whole lot more. Sometimes information like usernames, permissions, IDs, and other bits can be used to piece together a puzzle that can provide a valuable key that can be used on unlocking things that you don't want unlocked. Often, an API will publish more data than that's displayed in the UI client. It's important to sanitize and filter to the data that's exposed through the API, as this can be viewed using other methods. So take advantage of your API gateway's ability to apply data transformation and data masking features to your APIs. Attackers are going to look at your API payloads for information that could be used for attacks. So pay a special attention if you're dealing with any kind of PII data, or if you're subject to any kind of government regulations or compliance. You might be sending data that could put you in jeopardy. You also need to check things like logs and errors. Are your errors leaking information that they shouldn't? Are your logs secure? Are you including too much information in your logs? Is there information in your logs that could be used to launch an attack on your APIs? Number two, we have know your APIs. There's also improper asset management vulnerability that you need to be concerned about. You can't protect what you don't know you have. You need a complete inventory of all your APIs. Inventory all of them, whether they're in the cloud, on-premise, in a data center, service mesh. You need to find all the known and unknown APIs. So what are the different types of APIs that are out there? When evaluating the security of APIs, it's important to remember that there's some types of APIs that you may be familiar with, and there's other types that you might not. Some of the common ones are the public APIs, external, open, internal, partner, third-party, composite, and the beta testing and staging. Other ones that you might not be as familiar with are things like shadow APIs, or those internal or public APIs that you created, but you try and keep them off the radar. Zombie APIs are APIs that work and are in use, but they haven't been updated in a long time and are probably missing some key security updates. And you have Frankenstein APIs, and these are unofficial internal or external APIs that are hacked together to scrape data in various ways from systems whose APIs are either insufficient or non-existent. Also, say you have a beta or test API out there and it's running a different version than the production API. It might be older or newer. An attacker might be able to take advantage of a vulnerability that exists in an older or newer version of your API that hasn't been fully tested, either in a while or not yet. All APIs need to be managed and secured to ensure that you protect your data, your customers, your company, and your reputation. Now, number three, we have know your users. A critical vulnerability in this category includes the broken object level authorization, or BOLA vulnerabilities. Now, this is when someone is able to access data through a resource that they shouldn't be able to. Now, we're specifically talking about authorization at the object level here. If you're thinking about authorization and APIs in general, you're thinking too broadly. Don't assume that an API user, once authenticated, is only going to be trying to access their own resources or the ones that you told them they should be accessing. If I'm logged in as Bob, what happens when I try to read a resource that belongs to Jane? Or even worse, what if I try and push updates for that resource? These are simple examples, but even the Peloton case is an example of when an unauthenticated user could access data for other users, and as well as when they implemented a fix for a while that an authenticated user could go in, but even an authenticated, if there's no authorization policies in place, an authenticated user could access data for all the other users as well. So you need to take advantage of your API gateway that can provide a highly granular level of access control necessary to prevent these access control issues. So we also have broken object level or broken user authentication. So APIs that are not secure are at risk of attackers compromising their system using this exploit. So how are you handling authentication? How are you handling tokens for your APIs? So make sure that you test your API system to make sure that it's secure, and because an attacker will be taking a look at your APIs. So you also have broken function level authorization. An attacker may be able to guess an admin endpoint, and an API cannot rely on the client implementing proper security. So there's also things like mass assignment. In an effort to transform and bind the data from clients, sometimes a mass assignment vulnerability can creep in. This happens when an API allows data from the clients to save properties that a user shouldn't have permissions to update. An attacker might try to send additional properties that are valid, but not for them. If, say, they send some properties that get mapped to a database and it gives them access or rights to things. A best practice for avoiding this is to use whitelist and not blacklist as with your properties. Using your API gateway's policy enforcement to specifically define the properties that can be updated is one way to protect your APIs and data from the security threat. Now, number 4, we have know your tools. And there's 2 basic types of tools that I'm going to talk about here. Your defensive blue team tools and your offensive red team tools. Now, as far as defensive tools goes, there are a lot of products that you're going to use as part of your API defensive strategy, but you need to understand the function for each one in general and also the specifics of each particular product. You need to know what features this product may or may not have. Now, there's some key categories that I want to kind of hit on real quickly. First, you have the web application firewalls, or WAFs. And WAFs can be great at detecting suspicious traffic based on known algorithms. This might be based on frequency of calls, errors, IP ranges, or a multitude of other identification points. Do appropriate testing to know the limitations of your WAF and how it integrates with your other security products, especially your API gateway. Speaking of gateway, your API gateway and portal is going to be the core to your API security solution. If you are not currently using an API management solution for your APIs, I would highly suggest that you look into this first. Software AG Web Methods provides an on-premise and SaaS solution for securely managing your APIs. Now, as far as other API security products, often organizations will be looking into other security products to complement the API security that's provided by their API gateway. Often these products are broken into categories such as shift left and shield right. So shift left is referring to the security focus on the beginning of the API lifecycle process, and it integrates into the design and development of an API, which helps to protect the API through all the other steps of the lifecycle, all the way to retirement. You also have shield right. And this is talking about the emphasis on continuing to protect your APIs at runtime and beyond. It's important to understand how each of these products fits into the API lifecycle. These products can provide a defense against unknown attacks by working with your API gateway using a combination of AI and ML and defined algorithms and policies. Now, I also mentioned mobile applications here, but it's out of scope for this talk, but still very important. Make sure you secure your mobile apps and access to your APIs that your mobile apps could be using. I also mentioned logging here. Most tools will provide some sort of logging, but it's important to know where and how they're logging. Check with your own applications as well to make sure you're in that sweet spot of logging enough, but not too much. So what happens if you're under attack and your logs are suddenly going to become a valuable resource for you, but they could also potentially be a target for your attackers? Now, next, you have your offensive red team tools. I'm not going to go into details on these, but it's important that you understand the tools that could be used to find vulnerabilities in your APIs. Take a quick look at this list. You can take a look at it later, and I can post a link to some of these. Some of these you may be familiar with, and others you might not, but it's good to have a general understanding of these because others that might have malicious intent are going to have a understanding of these. So part of knowing your tools is understanding security misconfiguration. Security misconfiguration is one of the items on the OWASP API security top 10 list, and it's probably one of the most common issues leading to security exploits. While human error is tough to protect against, you can use an API gateway like Software AG Web Methods to shift some of that responsibility to shared and global security policy definitions, which can then be applied to a large collection of APIs, thus avoiding this security vulnerability. You could have the best products in the world, but if they're not configured correctly, then they're not going to be able to do their job of protecting your APIs and other assets. And last but not least, number 5, we have secure everything. Secure your data, your APIs, your organization, and your future. This is where everything from the previous 4 steps comes together. You need a complete and holistic solution for API security, and you will often have more than one product that you're using together. This makes number 4 key, know your tools, even more crucial. You need to know that the features and limitations of each product and how they work together. Are your security products working in line or out of band? How does your API gateway work with the shift left and shield right API security tools that you might be using? Remember, your API gateway is the core to your API security and needs to be powerful and flexible enough to work with all your security solutions. You need to secure everything. Now, take a look at a few of the OAuth API security top 10 items I'm listing here. You have lack of resources and rate limiting. Rate limiting is just placing restrictions on how many API requests can be made per hour, per day, or per month. Now, without proper limits on access to resources, an attacker could easily overload your API system. So using features like rate limiting, throttling, and other threat protection policies in your API gateway and API security tools, you can block denial of service attacks, limit large payloads, stop SQL injection, monitor traffic, and other things that will be very helpful. You also have security misconfiguration. I know this was in key number 4, but I'm mentioning it here again because it is so common and easily corrected. You need to know your tools and how to configure them correctly. And also there's injection. And API attacks can come in the form of malicious code that a client might try and trick an API into executing. APIs often have to interpret unknown data, and vulnerabilities can be exploited if the API blindly executes that code. It's important to never trust an API client, even with internal consumers. By defining data types and schemas and validating all requests through threat protection policies defined by your API gateway and API security products, you can prevent SQL and other types of injection attacks. And for a bonus, we have API security and strategy and best practices. So you need to document your processes. The tools you use, the people responsible to test you run, document it all. You also want to make sure your API documentation is secure. And what do I mean by that? Make sure it's up to date and has the latest examples. Also, make sure you're not including things that could lead an attacker to a vulnerability. Test everything. Use the tools that are available to you to test and scan your APIs to make sure your API security is covered. Vulnerabilities can often sneak in with code logic that has changed between releases, so don't depend on previously run tests. Automate what you can and integrate those results with the scheduled manual tests that you also run. It's also important to understand the difference between false positives and false negatives. Now, I'm not going to go in deep on this, but just understand the differences and how to handle these throughout the testing process. And last, keep learning. Things change very fast in the world of API security, and it is to your advantage to keep learning in order to understand these changes. And you also want to make sure that the tools and products that you are using are keeping up with this ever-changing world. So here we have the 5 keys that I gave you for API security, your API security journey. Now, the goal of this is to equip you with the basics, but there's so much more that you need to learn and understand with API security, so stay vigilant. Now, there are some video resources that you might be able to find useful when you're continuing your learning journey. And in these YouTube channels, you can find a variety of API and API security related resources that can help you level up your API security for your organization. And if you have any questions, you can also reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me any questions that you want. You can get to me by scanning this QR code or just by going to linkedin.com/in/Brenton House. Now, I know that was quick, but there's a lot to talk about with API security. But now there's something that's equally important with API security, and it's time to transition to API testing.
Thank you, Brendan. That was amazing. Thanks for that very quick overview of API security. Let me quickly share my screen, Brendan, if you will, if you can. Here, let me do that.
I'm not seeing the share at the moment.
Okay. Hopefully you're able to see it now.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So a quick recap on what Brenton spoke. A couple of use cases in terms of why API security is so important. We know, John Deere, where we had a simple, humble API. They wanted to, basically it was from the operations center. They would actually, give the VIN number of the John Deere equipment, and they would find out the customer details. And this is on the operations center. Whereas this is publicly available, it became available because of the authentication authorization issues. And you could actually get information, personal information about the John Deere customers. And also they could find out information on third-party equipments from the same API. Another very humble API was username taken, right? So they could check whether a particular corporate customer username is taken. A phishing attack on that particular API. They put down first 1,000 corporate customers or Fortune 1,000 corporate customer names in that API, and they could find out who are the customers of John Deere. So the intention of those APIs were completely different from how they were used and hacked. And similarly, like Brenton just spoke, Peloton, we had the same kind of issue. The intention was where users could find out on their mobile app how they're doing, what's the status of their exercise and overall performance. But this API actually exposed more data than was needed, like gender, address, and all the information that was not needed by this particular application. So they were depending on the front-end application to filter everything. But the API was providing more information than was needed, and authentication authorization was broken. So just to wrap up quickly, major problems that you have is SQL injection, authentication authorization issues, unencrypted communication, man into the middle can sniff into the data packets, look at the tokens and authorizations, having a very clear view of the inventory that you have as you stand, making sure what's in test, what's in production, what's in other environments, or developers connecting from a test environment into production, leaving those APIs there after testing without enough security. Some of those are very important things. And how much data are you exposing in your APIs? So given that, the API lifecycle itself, from a discovery, design, development, testing, and governance, API security has to be taken care across the breadth. It's like you have to live and breathe when you are part of an API management, API development, API testing organization. You have to live and breathe because the ecosystem is so dynamic. And Brenton touched on most of the items here today, but this slide is just kind of giving you a one-point place to kind of look at what are the important things that you need to take care of. Encryption is very important. Authentication, authorization is very important. Having a strong policy, using an API management tool to implement that and configure it in the right way is very important. Web application firewall is very important. Any of the SQL injection, methods or cross-site scripting, if you will, it can be prevented with a strong web application firewall installation. Having the right kind of deprecation method. How do you retire your APIs? How do you let them go, off of your infrastructure? Most of the time you just leave them there, though they are not used. They are not used, but you just leave them there. Having an effective communication with your users on those APIs, making sure that those are taken off from your network. That's very important. So deprecation of APIs and how you manage the deprecation of the APIs is very important. And how do you prepare? So SQL injections are still there because there are a lot of legacy code out there, still code in C, code in C++. Java prevents this pretty much very nicely, but having a query to be prepared inside of API is very important. Dynamically making them work through string appends is a very, very risky approach, and it still lies there in a lot of legacy code. And there's therefore SQL injection is still the most used and most frequently used attack on APIs, because they can bypass the authentication and authorization mode, get through the parameters, create a SQL, attack your database, take control of it. So that's something now you have to review even your legacy code. How are those how SQL statements are built inside your legacy applications? Very important. Security testing, cover all of what is needed in security testing. Use some dynamic application security testing tools. So that gives you a clear view of, hey, this is not just one-time activity. You have to live through it. You have to breathe through it. So that gives a quick wrap up on that. Here is one example of some of the incidences that we talked about. So we had a customer, Quinnox had a customer who was a banking customer there into retail finance, and they had a lot of issues. They were not able to get through the certification of vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So, and then they have a lot of extra, excessive data exposure on their APIs, lack of resource rate limiting, security misconfiguration, injection. So in this particular case, of course, many different products can be implemented. We had implemented Azure API management, and we were able to provide all those, OWASP security list that on the right side that you see. So that's and definitely making these implementation of these kinds of API management tools really helps. And Software AG is also a fantastic tool from an API management perspective. So these we wanted to put this up here so that you understand that bringing some tools, configuring them in the right way does not only take care of your security, but takes care of your performance, also takes care of how you reduce your cost in the API economy, because consumption of the APIs really costs a lot nowadays. So that will wrap up the security piece. Let's move on to API testing. So API testing is very important, and some of the challenges that we see in the API testing, it's too technical. Most of the time, if you have to test APIs, you have to be a Java programmer or some other programming language. You need to know how to use command line interfaces, and you should be well versed in terms of validation of the parameters. How to prepare the data and how to prepare the assertions. So that needs a lot of programming skills. So that's generally a challenge in API testing, because quality assurance teams and most of the organizations do not have those capabilities. Pretty much you need a developer to do this work, and it's hard to collaborate. When I say that, the quality assurance team needs to collaborate with the testers, so they have to be in a common platform, or at least provide integrations into that platform so that they can test those APIs. And it's very difficult to test processes. So APIs are tested individually, but most of the time you need to chain multiple APIs to deliver a process to a business. and there can be a lot of issues when data is exchanged between APIs in terms of performance, in terms of how they deliver the overall business process. So that's very difficult with most of the tools that we have in the ecosystem today. Finally, you're dependent on desktops. You're doing performance testing. You want to do parallel testing. There are so many other tasks that you want to do on APIs, and you're not able to use the cloud ecosystem to do that. So these are the general challenges we generally teams face in testing as such. So when we move into this and see a tool like so this is some of best practices from an API test automation, but also I would like to highlight that we do have a platform, a SaaS-based platform. It's called Kairos, and you can go and check it out at kairos.com. You can also reach us out if you need more information on this. So this really brings all the problems that we talked about in the API testing, real-time problems that users face can really be addressed through a platform like this. These are best practices, but now it's been converted into a platform. You can import all the Swagger URL and the JSON URL in one click. You can parameterize all your API. Test parameterization can be done without writing a single piece of code. You can generate codeless assertions. You can actually virtualize this, where most of the times APIs, they are not available for test. You can create virtual APIs quickly and then make it available for testing against other systems. Quick functional and performance testing is also available, and all of this is no code, low code, and AI based, and they heal themselves well as you change APIs. And API process chaining, as I talked about, very critical. Very less, very less tools in the market really give you that kind of a capability, and of course, crowdsourcing of API components and great reporting. So some of these capabilities, which we talked about as best capabilities, are also available in this platform that you can always go and review. So let's look at one use case. When we use that kind of a best practice API testing tool, what happens? You're able to execute tests faster. So this is for one of the environmental management companies that we are working with. So the test execution times, 4,500 test cases are executed in less than 5 minutes. Overall build time for test cases is reduced by 40%. Increase the coverage at least 10x, and then there hardly any bugs in production. So that gives you an overview of what an automation into API, a no-code, low-code, AI-based platform can really help you with. That gives a quick cover of what I was supposed to present. And let's get on to. Let me stop sharing here, and we move on to the next segment of our conversation. Are secure, but what are the loopholes? What are the blind spots that still get left out there, and you struggle with them on a daily basis?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think is the hardest, and it comes down to the explosion of how much we're seeing APIs, right? I mean, it used to be 1, and now it's 250, and they do critical business for the company. And I think what the blind spot is, I think it's valuable to look at something and say, hey, I've got these things behind an API gateway. I've got all of my APIs going through this, a same set of gateways. There's really things around how you would look at it, and you need to compartmentalize. You need to look at the value of what you're trying to have and protect. And it's also, I mean, security has always been about layers, right? It's not just one thing. You actually have to take into account a lot of the other aspects of security. APIs have just, because we have the expectation that your timeline is now 2 weeks, right? And in a 2-week sprint, I want 5 more APIs. You just have to be able to turn that around quicker. You have to be able to validate it quicker, and use the new tools. But also, don't forget you have tools on segmentation and other things that you're going to have to lean upon as well. I think the biggest thing is the blind spot is it is the same base of how we look at security, but it's more complicated and it's faster. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, absolutely. You're compressing, you're delivering something within 2 weeks, and you have different layers of security to address. You're looking at the network layer, you're looking at the data governance, you're looking at the coding level, and then you're looking at how it is getting deployed. All of that put together within that 2 weeks time frame, you're trying to deliver an API and still cover all these aspects and get this reviewed thoroughly. And also, not to mention the endpoints where it's going to get consumed, whether it is mobile, web, or any other consumers in the ecosystem. I think that was a very thoughtfully said. Any challenges that you have faced in API testing, Nelson?
I think again, it's going to come to timeline, but it's also different types of testing, right? It's not just the ability to hit something and see if you can, cause it to fail, cause it issues, positive and negative testing, but also again, you're looking at, you may just be updating some things, or you may have 48 new APIs that are being implemented, and it's really the ability to create a mechanism for automation of the testing, quick cycles, understand where you can use regression. It is really much the ability for you to take and do the cycles fast, cover your bases, and really look at it from how you're gonna get your results. And the other thing that I would put out there is, as you begin to get results and information, it is often difficult to think about, well, if I don't get this out tomorrow, hey, I need to get it out tomorrow. But you really have to analyze what you're getting. You have to look at it, and you have to consume it and say, yeah, I'm okay not doing it tomorrow, because you know what? We need another week to evaluate this. We found some things, we have to push that off. And it's really about protecting your company, right? So it's a hard decision, but that's become more of a norm these days.
No, I think very well said. Very well said. Nelson, I have one last question for you. Before we take it to the audience. I know you've been leading architecture teams, you have been leading large development teams, delivering the complete transformation for digital ecosystems for large organizations like Tractor Supply and Lovis before that. What would be key takeaways for folks who are here today in terms of how they should look at their architecture teams and development teams? Are there key practices that they should follow, just as an expert advice?
Yeah, so I think one of the things, and this is one of those things that have always been difficult from a security perspective, but you do need to make, you need to have your security policies, you need to have your best practices, but you also need to kind of change the perspective of your developers, your architects, and make it a part of their job, right? And the only reason I bring that up is because oftentimes you can look at it and say, well, that's the security team's job, and this is this group's job. But without engaging your architects and having them begin to perceive and look at these things as part of their job is to make sure that things are continuous, they function, the right person is getting the information. You don't have requests from Czechoslovakia if you don't do business there. These kinds of things are the intellectual capital aspect of things, and I think that's harder because I think we always look at it and go, well, if I get this thing or I do this thing, I'm going to be solid. I've got something that I've done, right? It's harder to make that almost shift in how a person thinks, what they look at, and it's ongoing. It's continuous. New things are, as Brenton said, new things are coming up all the time. So you have to make it a journey as a part of these folks, and a journey that they can enjoy and become a part of.
Absolutely. It's just like checking your front door, back door, checking your security system before you go to sleep every night at home. Some of those practices, I think, very much apply to the architecture and the development teams. So this is very good. Thanks a lot, Nelson, and really appreciate answering those questions. Brenton, do you have any questions for Nelson?
I I was just curious, like when you're looking at, I mean, both testing and API security, do you see people at your organization? Is it a fight to get adoption? I know that, I mean, things have been in the news all the time lately with cybersecurity. Do you see that more people realize the importance of all this and they're willing to learn more or participate more in that process?
Yeah, I think it's, it's funny. I would, not funny, haha, but funny from the sense of looking at it and saying, from one aspect, there is a lot more known or understood about it, and that's at every level of the organization. And that's a good thing because it begins to create an awareness beyond just the practitioners, right? If it's just the practitioners, oh, they're often in a room over there. We'll just leave them over there, and they can talk about it themselves. So the awareness is good. I think that I think there is a lot still from the perspective of, and this has always been the case. We'll get to security the next time around, right? The business thing is most important. We'll do what we can right now, but we'll revisit it. I think the hardest part of some of that is, if we say we're going to revisit something, we don't necessarily ever go back to it. And so it takes that kind of mindset. But also, I think takes the kind of mindset that, if I put something out there right now on an API gateway, I could pretty much take down our consumer mobile app, right? If it's not looked at correctly, if it's not thought about. So I think the education and awareness is at the highest it's been from the levels because of everything that's going on. I still think that there needs to be a lot more about how important that is because it has business implications. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's very helpful.
And just to the audience, if you have any questions, please start posting if you have, and we can start answering those. So is there any other way for them to ask questions apart from posting it here? So we'll wait for a couple of minutes and see if there are any questions.
But the responsibilities are going to fall on someone, whether or not you have that role. Someone usually is responsible for cybersecurity, and that which often includes IT security and API security and a lot of other things at an organization.
Any other questions? So while we wait for another question, Nelson, one question to you, and Brenton, you can also answer this question.
I actually do see something that says we have a lot of APIs. Is there an easy way to update all APIs for security for Brenton? Somehow I think it's in reverse on how it's popping in there. I don't know if you saw that, Brenton.
Okay. I mean, there is to apply policies that will go across multiple APIs. You can start grouping things, and you don't then have to go into the level of applying security to each individual API. Now, that doesn't relieve development and architecture from having to understand security, because like you said, API security is everyone's job. So there's things in security related things while you're designing and coding that you need to be concerned about. But then there's also runtime security that you need to worry about. So there's so many different aspects of security. But as far as policies, understanding the features that you can apply global policies, that can save you a lot of time. And two, because then if you're doing each one manually, a lot of times there's a factor of human error, and you can forget one or forget to update the security on one. So again, understand your tools there, but your gateway can apply a lot of global policies across the board.
Now we have a lot of questions flowing in.
You want to take one another question before we close for the day, and then definitely, there are questions, we'll take them and then reach out to you offline as well.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I think there is this other one. What is the recommended method of securing your API? I mean, you really talked a little bit about that, Brenton, where it's in layers, it's multiple things. It's not just the one thing for an API itself, but really
you can't use OAuth, and when it does apply, there's a lot of different ways to use it, but a lot of times you have machine-to-machine APIs that are going to require different flow or different types of authentication. It doesn't mean they shouldn't be authenticated, they're just going to use a different type of authentication. And especially with mobile, you have to be really, you have to watch out with mobile, because if it's not as a user, it's tough to use OAuth, but you also don't want to embed your API keys all over the place, because someone might decrypt it and pull your API key out and use it maliciously. So yeah, know all the different ways that you can secure, but also when to apply which method.
Thank you, Brendan. And I think with that, we'll close the questions. Key actions that you can take and ask from all the audiences is that if you have any questions, reach out to Brenton, reach out to Software AG, and also they have their API and B2B cloud integration platforms available for trial. And Quinnox is also available. We can do an assessment of your security, do an assessment of your integration platforms. We can be a trusted partner, and then answer any questions, help you, and guide you through an implementation of a platform as a service provider. So that's an ask. And if you have, take down this email ID, marketing@quinnox.com, to reach out to us. You can also reach out to me at Jaffar, Jaffarr, @quinnox.com. We will also reach out to each one of you, thanking you after this call with a specific email. So, you have ways of communicating with us, and we will also answer your questions that are left out here. So with that, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Nelson. Thanks a lot, Brenton. And thanks a lot for all the folks who took time and joined today. I hope we made some impact, and you have some pointers to take in your daily jobs in terms of how you're trying to secure your APIs and test your APIs.